Just quickly, again, I want to thank you. The second thing I would say, we have a question and an answer session at the end, toward the end of the meeting. I know I have a bad memory as well, so I would know if you have any of the questions that we'd like to raise, please add it to the chat box, and we will answer it and discuss it toward the end. But so that we can go through it as fast as possible, then let's discuss all these questions toward the end in the question and answer session. This should be between 30 to 45 minutes, hopefully, so it won't take a lot of your time. I can see that still people are attending, and we'll start in a second. I think we should give it a start now. Again, my name is Dr. Salah Brady. I'm the head of legal DNA legal testing service at Eurofins Forensic Services in the UK. We're gonna start today by discussing a very important topic that actually I believe is every single one is facing on a daily basis when dealing with families, and in particular when it comes to drug abuse, how to look at these cases, how to interpret them, how to read them, how to even present them in courts. This is the most challenging part. And this is what we will try to answer most of the questions today. There is this topic is again something that I keep getting in every day in my court hearings. So I thought to share some of my thoughts and some of the science's thought with you, so you can use it in your cases. I want to start quickly with an icebreaker type of question. Can you please tell me what is the most important part for you when choosing a testing provider? Is it turnaround time? Is it price? Is it quality? Is it customer service? If you just write in the chat box in the text it to us, or write in the chat box, and that will give us just some feedback of what aspect to focus on more going forward. And again, we would like to have this feedback from you. So very quickly, for you, what do you think is the most important factor when considering a testing provider like us or anyone else? Again, is it turnaround time? Is it price? Is it quality or customer service? For me, it's all of them, of course. But I would say for me, it would be quality and customer service, I would say. I don't know for you. Um, Amazing. Thank you, Emma. Okay. Thank you, Mamata. Yes, interesting. I think it's really, really interesting. We can see all of these answers, and it's very clear that actually different. Many of you has different opinion about it. But with the agenda today, so what we're going to deliver to you today is actually how can we help you, quickly who we are. I'm not going to take long, I promise. Then we'll go, we're not going to make it boring. And so I made sure that actually this is interesting enough and as interactive as possible. So we'll have two activities as well for you. And later on, we go through the key differences between children and adult, how to look at it, how to read it, how to interpret it. So next time when you have an expert report from a drug testing company in front of you, you will load this presentation and you can compare it to it. And we will have case studies. I know from previous CPDs that actually many of you have asked for these. So in this one, we've added case studies into it. We have 3 or 4 different case studies that we're going to cover, something that you've seen before in court, something that you've read about, or maybe some of it you've been involved directly in it. The last thing that we were going to talk about is actually, or we're going to discuss your questions, and I will try my best to answer. If you have any current active cases right now, I'm more than happy to answer some of these questions, obviously, if you have any questions in regards to that. So quickly, who are we? Eurofins, I'm sure you've heard about us. Eurofins, if you watch BBC, the CSI, Eurofins is #1 providing company for the forensic service for police around the UK, not just the Met Police, Met Police is one of them, but around the UK, I think we cover more than 70% of the police services, forensic drug, alcohol, toxicology service for the police around the UK. Worldwide and worldwide as well, we are present in 61 countries. We have more than 900 laboratories, and obviously a huge amount of drugs that we can test for in these laboratories on the top of actually these clinics around the world as well. Employees wise, there's 60,000 of us, so I'm sure one of us will be able to help you. Now, when it comes to Eurofins legal testing services, which is us in this case, Eurofins legal testing service is part of Eurofin Forensic Services in the UK. We have this branch that looks after family law mainly and drug and alcohol testing for civil law in any case. Our customer service team is there. We have one of the most advanced state-of-art laboratory in the UK that can to fulfill your inquiries and your needs, and as well as 250 plus reporting scientists that can as well help you with your cases. And last but not least, as everyone was going to ask at the latest stage, actually about the collection network. We have the largest in the UK, 150 plus. We can cover the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, and of course, part of it, which is Scotland and Wales, if needed. Very quickly, this is the last slide about us, which is we are Lab 51 toxicology accreditation. We hold that, which is the highest accreditation for toxicology, drug and alcohol testing accreditation. It's higher than 17025, but for DNA, we have also 17025 for that. We have the highest sensitivity testing methods for your drugs and alcohol, and as well the largest drug testing library in the UK. So what does that mean? That means we can test for everything, you name it. So basically, you just name it. Even as far as paracetamol, as far as ibuprofen, as far as some prescribed medication that someone can use or abuse, such as codeine, for example, such as tramadol, morphine. All of these can be prescribed but can be also abused, and also common drugs that can be used by adults but can be very harmful to children. So these we can test more than anyone else. Now, this is my favorite slide in every single training, and I believe it is to you as well, because one of the main questions would be actually, what's the difference between hair, nails, urine, and blood? But personally, from my perspective, there's much difference in terms of accuracy. All of them are good. All of them are accurate. However, the main difference is the detection window or the detection period. Um, Something that you need to always remember. Always remember, hair comes first with the longest detection window, and hair and nails basically followed by urine, blood, and breath. So when we look at hair, it is very, very widely used in the family code for the known reason, which is the long detection window. So when you are trying to find the history of use or abuse of a substance for the past 6, 7, or even up to 12 months, if hair is not available, we can use nails in that case. Nails can also be used to test for several months, so it's very useful matrix. Again, it is accurate because many times I was asked this question: is how accurate is nails? Nails are accurate, same accuracy, if not better, but it detect different periods, followed by urine, a couple of days, which is very, very short, and blood. We know these two are not much used in the family code for drug abuse, the drug of abuse. However, here and there, it still can be requested. One of the things that I want to shed light on is actually breath. I know what you're thinking of. You're thinking of breath alcohol testing, but what I mean here is breath drugs testing. Take this note in this case. Eurofins is the only innovative company in the UK that actually invested in a drug testing in breath technology. So we can test for drugs in breath if needed. The only other side of this part is actually it has also a short detection window. However, it's non-invasive and it is where the technology is heading toward. Now, Going to a bit of the science, how accurate is hair testing for both adults and children? Now, as a general definition, hair is accurate. It can detect drugs, it can detect alcohol abuse. We can use it in both children and adults, and even elderlies. Anyone can we can use the hair testing for anyone to monitor behavior, to monitor exposure. However, we need to be careful when we report the results to differentiate between these individuals. So, not reporting all concentration of drug can provide false readings, false positives or false negatives. So, concentrations of drugs in children is very, very different to concentration of drugs in adults. I'll give you an introductory example, very quick example. If me and, for example, Nathan, or me and Emma, or me and Andrea, who's attending this meeting, or Elizabeth, or anyway, use the same amount of drugs, and we compare ourselves to a child who's 6 or 7 years old, we used exactly, for example, 1 gram of cocaine, and we tested ourselves after 1 or 2 months, the results will be extremely different in compared to the child. And obviously, later on, we're gonna explain why. Part of it is actually its cutoff levels, contamination of this child, sensitivity of testing method, and also her circumstances, and which is the most important part, interpretation of these results, the results that comes from the lab. Who's going to interpret it? Does he have this? Does he or she have the skills and as well the experience to report such a child result? Now, we all know that children are impacted in different way to adults. We know that many cases, I'm 100% sure that most of you has dealt with cases where the mother or the father has admitted the use or abuse of alcohol or drugs, but the impact on children is massively different. It's very, very different. That can lead to social impact, that can lead to negligence, and also as far as medical impact. One of the cases that I've worked around recently is even led to death of that child. A 5 months old child who was born in 2022, mostly toward January. Negligence and drug has led to the death only after five months. So that's why it's extremely important, actually, the cold and children services consider these evidence and look at it in a correct way in order to look after a child case in a pre-proceeding or in a proceeding during a pre-proceeding before it gets to court, and when it is still at the level of the local authority, or even when it gets to the court. It's extremely important that these impacts or these evidence are considered and read correctly. Also, detecting these substances of use in children and comparing it to adults are extremely important to build better evidence. I always refer to it as a better picture for you when dealing with these cases, and also for the judge and for the court in general, and for all the parties to understand exactly what has happened in that case, whether this child has actually been given the drug, whether this child has been only exposed to it, all aspect of the case that we need to consider. Again, we're going to go through it in details in a minute. When we look at a child, we need to understand that actually the way they carry on with their life is very, very different to ourselves, in terms of our daily life, in terms of even us showering, in terms of us being careful about what we are exposed to, who we are. But for a child, it's very, very different. Number one, the daily routine. This is what's part of what I said earlier. The daily routine of a child: showering, changing, napping, being exposed to friends, family, hugs, kisses, all of that. Physical contact. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of families admit the use of drugs, which can be okay for certain cases, but these child can be physically in contact with their parents after they had, for example, some cocaine or some cannabis, and they stroke their heads with a contaminated hand that can cross-contaminate the hair of a child. If we take that hair and test it later, that will show us positive. So we need to consider that very, very carefully. Indirect exposure. How many of us has got mainly leather sofas in the living room? Well, not even leather sofas, but leather sofas will actually leave a lot of traces. But that's why I gave this example. Any furniture that the parents and the children use at the same time, this can also cross contaminate the samples of the child. If they have a father or a mother who abuses a substance, this can contaminate the sofa through the sweat, through the bodily fluid. When I mean bodily fluid, I mean sweat, I mean saliva, I mean even urination, if that's semen, any type of excretion that can contaminate these items or objects. Passive exposure. These cases we face every day, mainly in families that abuse substances. They have their kids around in a room where the father or the mother are smoking cannabis. The room is full of smoke. The child is exposed to the smoke, and also in a room where many people are abusing crack cocaine or even just normal cocaine, where in a room full of cocaine powder. So that goes and lead to passive exposure. Deliberate use. We've seen it before, and I'm sure you've heard about it before. Parents trying to give their kids some drugs to make them go to bed early as possible. And one of the main drugs that we've seen before is actually cannabis, being given cannabis or other drugs, ketamine or other drugs to force them to do certain activities. Accidental exposure. I've seen it personally as well, like several times when the families leave drug on a table after they use it, or some leftovers, and there's a couple many cases where these child come and try this drug, or without knowing it, lick it, try to consume it. This is what we call the accidental exposure. And the last one, which actually summarizes everything, is the actual environment where they are living at. One of the cases that I want to quickly share with you with a child that we had and we were testing. He was positive for drugs. However, his parents were negative for drugs. And that actually raised a massive question because I've never seen this before. But when we looked deeper at the case, we found out after testing actually the grandparents were the abusers, not the direct father and mother, the direct parents. And this exposure has happened through the distant family, which is the grandparents. And that's why looking at the environment in total in full to draw a picture or draw a conclusion is extremely important. And that's why you need to consider all of these factors. And I would urge you to consider all of these factors when you have any report, any expert report, or any drug and alcohol result in front of you where a child is involved or being part of the bigger picture. And that's why there's a different factors and variables that you need to consider when conducting and interpreting a child case. Mainly, I know it's hard for you, but my advice in that case, it's not happening all the time as far as I can understand. But when you test a child, always try to test the family with them, the direct parents, and if possible, again, maybe try to test the environment that they are around. And obviously, we can facilitate this for you. Now, the activity one, as I promised, is not going to be boring. Activity one, I want to ask you to use your mobile phones or your computers and just Google children cutoff level. If you just go into Google and say children cutoff level, I'm just going to give it a few seconds. Now, I've done that earlier, children cutoff level, and these are the results that I have found on Google. There's no such thing, basically. There's no such thing as children drug cutoff level. And this is extremely important for us. Every single one of us, I believe, has been involved in these cases. They've looked at children reports of drug abuse report, and they've read actually it's above cutoff, below cutoff, it proves use or abuse or no use. But for children, there's no such thing. These cutoffs are mainly for adults, are mainly for active users, and that's why, by definition, even the scientific societies and researchers have defined the cutoff level as a level that we can use to compare an individual to say if he's an active user. I would even go as far as saying active repeated user or an active repeated user. And from my understanding, I've never seen or a young child who's an active repeated user. Usually a child is exposed to environmental sources of drug, or actually accidentally a user, or has been given a low amount of a drug. And that's why these drug cutoff levels in here for children do not apply for adults, and vice versa, obviously. So the Society of Hair Testing and the European Workplace Drug Testing Society has actually has actually advised about cutoffs for adults, but not for children. I can see there's one question already in the chat about 300 nanogram per milliliter. So now in here, obviously, we're talking about, if it's per milliliter, we're talking about mainly urine rather than hair. Usually it's per milligram if it's for hair. But we will look at it, if you allow me, Mamata, toward the end of the CPD, please. So anyways, the Society of Hair Testing and the European Workplace Drug Testing Society has published a list of cutoff levels of drugs in hair, but for adults. They've never mentioned that these can be used for children. And that's why the labs cannot use these cutoffs for children. To give you more proof and to give you more understanding of what I'm talking about, we had a meeting, the committee of the Society of Air Testing. I was part of this meeting in Sevilla, in Spain. That was just toward the beginning of COVID, where everyone started to wear masks, and I thought that was crazy. But still, we managed to get to this meeting in Spain. The conclusion of that meeting, and that's now is published in a consensus on the Society of Hair Testing website, and you can look at it. During that meeting, we've discussed children cutoff levels and whether we can use these cutoff levels for children and adults. The first point that we've considered is actually that these cutoff levels are mainly there, again, as I said, to identify the active drug user, someone who actively consume the drug in adults. The other point that actually we concluded, and in that consensus, again, is available on the Society of Hair Testing website and published in 2021, is actually these cutoffs should not be used in drug-facilitated crimes. So something like spike, rape cases, and in criminal cases, and as well as when someone has used the drug once or less frequently. And that rings a bell. When a child is exposed to a low amount of the drug, the cutoffs should not apply. In the same meeting, in the Society of Hair Testing, we've mentioned it very, very clearly in point 7.3 that for hair analysis in children, the cutoff is not to be considered, but lower limits are to be considered. What is meant is actually you need to use laboratories that has lower sensitivities to be able to detect lower levels. So the level that only use the cutoff level as the limit cannot be used to test for drugs in children cases, because in children cases, mainly the results could be lower than the cutoff level, and that's why lower limits need to be used. These are the advised, as I said, by the consensus of the Society of Hair Testing that was published in 2021. I've added even more in this case. There is also another consensus published in 2012 that also mentioned very clearly that evaluating exposure in infants and children must be considered with care, and these cutoff levels also should not be applied in that case. Researchers and scientists outside the Society of Hair Testing and the European Workplace Drug Testing Society has also researched this matter and concluded that the incorporation of drugs into children is very different from adults, and that's why in this case when we look at drug results in children, we should not compare it to adults. Always try to compare it and interpret it separately and differently. And that's why you can see on this slide, the first sentence that I wanted to add is actually always remember, in every single case that you can see in the future, there's no cutoff level for children. When you see that in a conclusion of an expert report, remember this phrase, no cutoff level for children. Some people still use it, which could be okay. However, the interpretation should be different. And that's again because of these reasons. Accidental exposure to drug, that means exposure or consumption of low amounts of the drug, will not show in hair at the level of the cutoff level, because the cutoff level will be here. the accidental exposure will be somewhere around here. So if we use the adult's cutoff level to test, we will not be see what happened just under the cutoff level. That's why we need to use a lower cutoff level, a lower quantification limit in order to detect these type of drugs in children. The same as exposure to environmental uncontaminated and passive exposure to the drug. Again, the cutoff level is here. The exposure is going to be somewhere around here. This cutoff does not apply. And obviously, I'm sure most of you have heard of passively consuming drug through, as I said earlier, being in a place where drug was present, or breast milk from mothers who abuse the drug. There's research that proves, and I would urge you to take note of that, research that proves that actually cocaine can be transferred to children via breast milk. Even morphine and ketamine as well can be transferred, and other drugs obviously can be transferred to children via breast milk. Transferring low amounts of drugs over a longer period of time will always be lower, and that's why the cutoff level again should not be used in infants case, because the amounts that are transferred from the mother's breast milk to the children is much lower than the cutoff. And in this case, the cutoff is very, very high in compared to where we should be looking at. Now, imagine that actually we have a case of a child who's been exposed to drugs through the mother's breast milk. The levels are low in here and the cutoff in here. You will receive a report that says that actually the results are negative. The results shows that actually the child is completely drug free. There's nothing happened about it. It's a safe environment. Give it back. It's a safe environment. There's no negligence, no risk for his life. Well, actually, it's a false negative because the cutoff is here. While actually, there's some drugs in between. And that's why we need to drop this quantification limit and use a company and a service that actually can look for lower quantification limits, not purely the adults cutoff levels. Again, that will limit the possibility of mistakes and risks on the child. Another quick activity I'm going to ask you again is actually, we know that the adult's growth rate of hair is 1 centimeter per month. That means the hair grows at 1 centimeter per every single month. But what do you think that the children growth rate? You don't have to answer, just think about it for a few seconds. We know, as I said, that adults growth rate is on average grows at 1 centimeter in every single month. So in 2 months, my hair is going to grow 2 centimeters. That means actually if you test 1 centimeter of hair, that will provide you the history of 1 month. If you test 2 centimeters, it's gonna provide you the history of 2 months. And obviously if you test for 6, it's gonna provide you the history of 6 months. But again, that's in adults, because we know that the average growth rate of hair in adults is 1 centimeter per month. However, in children, there is no such thing again. Very similar to cutoff level, no one exactly knows what is the average growth rate of hair in babies, I mean infants, and in children. The growth rate can vary. We know for a fact that babies and infants after birth, they have a slow growth rate, and then that will increase after 2 years and start becoming variable after this period, all the way up to 16 years old. The hair growth rate will vary. That's why this rule, where it says 1 month means 1 centimeter means 1 month, cannot be applied on children. It provides an additional helpful evidence. However, it should not be applied on children. So if I'm testing a child who's 8 years old, I'm testing 3 centimeters of his hair, I cannot purely say that the 3 centimeters that I've used to test will provide me a history of 3 months. It could be actually 1 month and a half, and it could be 4 months. Okay, so that's extremely important when we look at it, and interpreting scientists need to look after it. We would advise in this case to look for segmental analysis, and again look for the pattern of use rather than just a one-off conclusion. And as I said, children segmentation can vary as well, because it's not 1 centimeter per month. So the month I'm looking at could mean 1.5 months or 2 months instead of 1 month for adults. So again, it's not the same as adults. Now, in this case, obviously, children and infant has different physiology and therefore different complex way of interpreting these results. The drug is going to be the same. Cocaine is going to be in adults and children in the same form. However, the way we interpret it as a result on the top of cutoff level is different. So that's why we need to give it different consideration when we look at the children cases, mainly because almost 90% of the children are exposed to their parents' sweat. They sleep next to them, they use the same pillow, they use the same bedding, they sometimes they're very close to them, they are exposed to their parents' sweat. If someone hugged her baby or someone hugged his baby while sweating, the sweat contains drugs that can contaminate the child's hair. On the top of that, the child hair is more porous. What does that mean? It means actually the child's hair has more holes or more openings than adults. So drugs can even get into the hair from the external environment, from the outside environment. So imagine you have a porous hair, and again using the same bedding of a parent who is a heavy user of a drug. There's no question some drug will get into the child's hair. That's why we need to be extremely careful when we look at child hair, and especially when we interpret it. Again, I'll take you to some facts in the site by the site of hair testing in 2011. They mentioned that the average hair growth rate which apply on adults should not be assumed to be applicable for children and infants, and therefore need to be considered in a different way. Coming to this slide, again, more facts about it. Incorporation rate as well, very quickly, as a last slide before we go to the case studies. Incorporation rate as well for children, that takes us to the first example that I've given. If myself and, for example, Stacy in this meeting, or Lauren, consumed 1 grams of cocaine and compared it to a child who's 5 years old, who's consumed also 5 grams of cocaine, the results will be completely different. That's again because the incorporation rate or the absorption rate of drugs to our hair is different to children. And that's again something that the your report that you're going to take to court need to consider when looking at the drugs. Very quickly, in conclusion, and concluding everything that we've spoken about before we jump into the case studies, which are very exciting. There's several factors that you need to consider every time you instruct a drug and alcohol test in hair for children. Number one, cutoff. Let me remind you, if you haven't taken a note, please take a note now. Cutoffs are made for adults, not for children. Number two, hair growth rate. Hair growth rate for adults is completely different to children and should not be applied. It can be used as a useful tool, but not as a direct tool. Detection window can be different because of the whole hair growth rate. So the 1 month in my hair is not exactly the same in my child's. And again, exposure. It's a massive problem in children cases. Exposure is everywhere, especially in families that abuses drugs. Their children are almost 100% exposed to certain sources of contaminants throughout the behavior views. Again, as we said, from sharing beddings, pillows, hugs, kisses, hair strokes, all of that can expose this child to contaminants of drugs. And that's why just the last sentence says, do not interpret the children cases the same way as you interpret adults. And this is my advice and as an expert and as an expert in toxicology and hair testing. Um, they will be recording. Yeah, they will be recording. Thank you, Nathan, for providing that. Going to the case studies. Some of the cases, as I said, you've heard of, maybe you've been part of. These are real cases that we've been involved with. The first case is actually the death of the child that I mentioned earlier, 5-month-old child. I think he was born, as far as I remember, in January or February, and then unfortunately passed away later in the year, only after 5 months. There was a big family. The father was advised actually at the beginning. He didn't admit the use of cocaine, but later on, after investigation, him and the partner admitted the use of cocaine. They've confirmed that they use cocaine only in the kitchen after midnight when all the babies or all the children are asleep. It is a big family, a massive family, so the house is crowded. This is why I wanted to mention this part. This is something that you need to consider, and we need to consider from experts' point of view. These information need to be shared with us. Social service, actually, the reports from social service and the reports from schools were brilliant. I said pass. Basically, there was no concern whatsoever that this house has got any negligence problems. It was a pass from social services. It was a pass from school reports. But when we tested that child, that child, there was cocaine, and the kids also tested showed traces of cocaine as well in their hair. It started with a baby that died, and then that followed all the children in that house. Actually, there were more than five, but I'm only sharing the details of five, where cocaine was detected in their hair, and the results were similar to these. So in this case, you can see child one, child two, child three, child four, and child four mainly, and that there are drug results in this case, and the mother and the father. It's much lower when compared to the mother and the father. However, I had the privilege to have access to the expert report because I was asked to give an evidence in that case as well. And unfortunately, the reporting scientist in that company has reported that all four children are abusers of cocaine, or users of cocaine in that case. In this case, part of me was a bit shocked. The other part is actually uh, they need to be very careful when they say that four children are actually users of cocaine, especially when we see that actually the parents are active users, and look at the trajectory of the evidence. So I have here a graph for you guys to look at. So these are 3 centimeter segmentation of hair, yellow, red, and blue. You can see the father, you can see the mother results for cocaine, and these are the four children. But look at the trajectory or the pattern from the children. The yellow is the oldest segment, which is the furthest from the scalp. The red is the middle one, and the blue is the closest to the scalp. You can see all of them are showing reduction, highest in the furthest segment and lower in the closest nearest segment to the scalp. Compare it to the parents, high levels or medium levels of repetitive consumption of cocaine. Children all low, the same pattern. In my opinion, it's very dangerous in this case to follow the conclusion of that reporting scientist, because especially looking at the older being higher and the closest being lower, there is high chance that these children has been exposed externally to cocaine, because older hair, as you can imagine with me, will have higher chance or more time to be exposed for sweat, for contaminated environment, while the closest part of the hair is actually covered by a lot of hair. So drugs will find it harder to get and contaminate the closest segment, which is the blue one, and that's why it shows a decrease, a trajectory of decrease. And again, in this case, I would be very careful to say straight away that these children are abusers. Again, it's very careful. This is going to court. This is in court, and the consequences of two parents giving their children drugs, you would agree with me, is completely different from saying that these children are exposed to drugs. Massive difference. It becomes simply a criminal matter. And I've been involved in a couple of those. Instead of saying that the parents are criminal, and then actually the parents has got responsibility of negligence, that's completely different. Uh, Case study two, where we have a case of negligence of two kids. Social service received reports of a 6 years old boy and 3 months old brother has been given methadone regularly to facilitate the sleep. The children were removed by police and social services and placed in care. An emergency protection order was obtained, instructing to take samples to confirm that both have been given methadone or drugs. During pregnancy, the mother has taken drugs and her urine tested positive as well for drugs, including cocaine and cannabis. Now, with the results of those, in this case, in one of the cases, uh, I need to. Okay, sorry for that. Back to this slide. So in the results of this case actually were positive. However, we need to be very careful again in these two children. The 3 months old baby has been exposed in two ways to the mother, cocaine and cannabis use behavior. Number one, in the womb during the gestation, during pregnancy, So whatever the mother is consuming is being transferred to the kid, just as a natural matter during pregnancy. So it's almost 100% that when the child is delivered or in the first 3 months, if he got tested, the 3 months old baby, he's going to test positive. And the second part is actually this baby is exposed to the mother's milk. So he consumed the mother milk, so the mother breast milk, whatever drugs that the mother abused is going to be transferred to the baby through the milk. So again, in this case, it's very important to look at it from a different way. Instead of saying that the baby is a drug user or he's been given deliberately a drug, and instead and compare it to the passive exposure to the mother breast milk and during pregnancy as well. Obviously, the result of this court case, we know what is it going to be like, but again, it's very important that we draw the correct picture and image. Now, going to case study 3, please feel free to take notes and ask questions about these case studies as well. So case studies D is 3, where we have a drug in a child's hair sample that was detected. 3 years old girl had been tested for cocaine and was reported positive. As a user, again, whether given it actively or not actively. Social services obviously were involved at a later stage. Parents are positive, medium to high, and family solicitor challenging the results, saying that the baby or the child has not been given the drug. Mamata, definitely, we will talk about it. I will answer this question in a second. So the answer to you very quickly is definitely it is possible. So now testing the lab it's not intercepted, it should be interpreted the child as consumer of cocaine. You can see the results on the top. You've got the parents and the child. The child is low, 100, 200, and 300 picograms, and also you can see the cocaine in the parent in this case. I want you to look at the graph and consider the following: the pattern of detection, concentration, and the parents' results as well. On the top of the yellow bar in this case, the yellow bar, it shows the washes. Yeah, the washes in the child and the washes in the mother. Very clearly, the washes in the mother are very low, and that confirms the washes of the hair. That confirms that the mother is a user, and in this case, high user of cocaine. However, the levels of cocaine in the child are very, very low. Again, it's decreasing, but it's almost as similar to what was detected in the child. The washes, which is the external contaminants of cocaine on that hair that Eurofin does, help massively to differentiate between consumption and external contamination. So and when we did the washes, it was 300 picograms, and everything else in the hair is similar to the washes. In this case, it's very, very dangerous to say that this child is a consumer of cocaine or has consumed cocaine actively. There's high levels of cocaine in the washes. That means he's been exposed externally to cocaine. We know, as I said earlier, that children has got porous hair, so it's got hair with holes in it, and drugs can enter the hair. So in this case, it is highly likely that this child could be exposed externally to the drug, and we should not interpret this as an active user. So in this case, I wouldn't 100% say that the mother is a criminal in this case and she has given her baby cocaine. My last case study in this case, very quickly, which is amphetamine in a child. It was detected at actually medium levels, but when we look again quickly at the washes, um, when we look again at the washes is the yellow bar again in the chart. The hair here, June, July, which is the most recent period, and April, May is the furthest distal end. And the levels in the hair in the washes, when we washed the hair and tested the washes before testing the actual hair, it showed that actually there is a lot of drugs in the washes. So straight away, these should not be considered as consumption. And in this case, it's more likely or highly likely that this child has been externally exposed to amphetamine contamination. So again, through different sources from the mother, the father, the environment, the house, it's highly likely again that this child has been exposed to amphetamine from external environment rather than actually being given amphetamine again, which will change completely the case. I want to thank you again. I'm sorry I've taken a bit longer than I thought, but we started a bit later. Uh, 12 past. But thank you so much for attending. We have the question time. Today, this was prepared by myself and Nathan, and we're more than happy to take questions at the moment. And as well, we will answer anything that you have. And on top of that, please feel free to get in touch with us. What we're offering today is a free case evaluation. So if you have a case at the moment that you have questions about, you don't have to share all the details with us. You can simply hide the personal information and send the reports to us, or simply email me or Nathan to say, I have this case, what do you advise? Or this case is coming, what do you advise? This is free at the moment. We're offering this for free of charge. We'll provide expert support for free of charge until obviously at a later stage when you want to test if you want, or when you want to be provided with a full expert statement or expert report that will be complete at different stage will be chargeable. But at the first stage, which is just giving an advice about a case or a question that you have, it's completely free of charge. Again, thank you, and I'm more than happy to take some questions. I know that we have already some questions, but I would encourage every single one of you, please, to ask any questions if you have. Now, I'll start quickly with Mamata. Thank you for raising the first question, Mamata. The first one about 300 nanograms. This is obviously the cutoff in urine. In her, the cutoff for cocaine is a bit different. It's per milligram of head, okay, and it is 0 0.5 nanogram per milligram per hair. Again, these are for adults. We don't expect children to achieve the same cutoff. Um, the will Corsac, thank you for answering that question. You are very close, but there's no growth rate for children and no cutoff for children. I have a question from, yeah, recording, as I said, that Nathan will be provided. Thank you for some of the really positive feedback. Again, more feedback after the session will be extremely useful to us to understand how we can deliver this better to you next time. So please email me or Nathan or drop a message to the invitation to say what should we improve in next time. So Mamato, you have a question. Can baby in utero be exposed to environmental drug use even if mom does not use drug herself during pregnancy? How important is it to request washes as part of the testing? So these are two questions. The first question is actually it is possible. Theoretically, on paper, if the mother has been exposed to significant amount of drugs, yes, the baby will be exposed to the same amount or less amount of drugs. I'll give you an example. If the mother was spiked, I have this case, I have seen this case before, a drink of a mother was spiked with drugs. Will that affect the baby? Yes, it will affect the baby depending on the amounts again in that case. So to answer the question, it is possible. We know that actually even being exposed to a room full of cannabis and inhaling a lot of cannabis can lead to exposure of the mother and therefore to the baby. However, the level should be much lower. And again, we will compare it to what we've seen before. In this case, this is an important and very clever question. In this case, the reporting scientist or the expert should have the skills and should have also the science to back him up on his interpretation based on the level that was detected. Quickly to cover the second question, which is how important is it to request washes as part of the testing and why? Number one, it's extremely important. Half of this CPD today is about the importance of external contamination. In children, in my opinion, I would be surprised if I see a negative baby in a family that abuses drug. I would be extremely surprised. Or let me say almost, I don't have the best memory, but let me say that I cannot think of a case where the parents are users and the children were completely negative. So exposure is highly likely in a family or in a place where drug is abused. That's why washing the hair and testing the washes, let's agree, washing is different from testing the washes. We have to take the washes and test it and compare it to the hair. Testing the washes are extremely important because, again, of this example, the one I've given shown here. In this case, Mamata, if I didn't test the washes, I wouldn't be able to see this yellow bar chart, yeah? I would only be able to see the three blue bars. And if if you give me these three blue bars to me, and you say, as an expert, can you tell me what happened here? I would say he's a user, 100% a user, really high levels. it shows actually consistent levels, especially in the second and third month as a user. But provide me with a yellow bar and say these are the washes, my story will change. I will tell you that actually, hold a second, this baby or this child has been externally exposed to the drug. Again, this completely changed the way that this case is going from being a case of a criminal matter. This case will be transferred to become criminal after the family been accused of giving their child amphetamine, or actually this case been approached as an exposure case where the family has neglected their child. Okay, let me. Oh, um, asking for washes testing. So Matt, thank you, is asking for washes and testing the wash an extra cost. Eurofins, no. That's Thank you for raising this question. So we're already doing some marketing now. We don't charge for washes. You get this free of charge, and this is an offer for any instruction with us. Washes are not charged. It comes with the testing. And by the way, every single test that we do, you don't have to ask us. We will wash it and we will test the washes for you beforehand. So you don't have to ask Nathan or Josh in that case whether you need to test the washers. We will do it automatically without you needing to ask us. As well, we will interpret that. We will report that as well. We know a lot of companies do wash the hair but do not test it and do not report it. But for us, we will test it, we will report it to you, we will provide it in the conclusion as well in the expert report. Everything will be there to help you, and obviously all of it will be interpreted by us, by our reporting, team. So yeah, you don't need to pay for it. I need to add, it's not only for hair that we wash, as well as for nails. So if you instructed a nail test with us, even if it's for an adult, we will wash the nail beforehand. Nails are extremely dangerous because you touching everything with your hand. I'm touching the surface. Almost, we know that 70% of the money notes in the UK are contaminated with cocaine. So touching these money notes will contaminate your nails. It's extremely important that you wash the nails and you test the washes of the nails to check if there's any external contamination. So we will do that again free of charge for nails as well. Automatically, you don't have to ask us to do that. We will do it. We will report it and we will interpret it, and then we will report it to you as well. Any more questions? If feel free.